What if a brain-computer interface could read your thoughts? Meta just announced a breakthrough AI system that can decode brain activity into words, images, and ideas. And this video is going to show you exactly why that breakthrough was years in the making. Buried inside the US patent system are detailed technical documents mapping out exactly how machines can capture and interpret neural signals, and some of those documents were filed years before Meta ever made an announcement. Some came from Meta, some came from Google. Some originated with independent inventors, and others trace back to DARPA's Neural Engineering System Design Program, researchers who rarely surface in mainstream headlines. Today, we're going to unpack those patents, decode the science behind them, and sit with the uncomfortable question that nobody seems to want to answer directly. How close are we, really, to AI that can read your mind? In 2023, Meta released a research paper describing a system that converts non-invasive fMRI brain scans into language using a semantic decoder with transformer architecture. And the scientific community paid attention in a way it hadn't in years. Building on groundbreaking work by Alexander Huth and Jerry Tang at UT Austin, published in Nature Neuroscience, Meta's system represents a significant leap forward. This isn't telepathy, and there are no surgical implants involved. What the system uses is something far more ordinary, blood-oxygen level-dependent, bold signals inside the brain, captured through a standard medical scanner. The reason this rattled researchers is that fMRI data is notoriously difficult to work with. It's noisy, slow, spatially blurry, and prone to interference, which made it one of the least promising candidates for high-accuracy language decoding. Unlike EEG-based systems that read scalp-level signals, fMRI captures deeper cortical patterns in areas like the motor cortex. And yet, Meta trained an AI using transformer architecture on that data that managed to reconstruct sentences subjects had heard, concepts they'd been thinking about, and even video scenes they'd watched. The accuracy wasn't perfect, and the output wasn't always clean, but it was unmistakable enough to matter. Imperfect accuracy still means the door is open, and that's the part most coverage glossed over entirely. The paper trail starts years before the announcement, and reading it tells a different story than the one that made headlines. Patent number US107435051, filed in 2018, titled Systems for Decoding Neural Activity Patterns, was filed by Facebook Technologies, now operating as Meta. It describes a method for detecting neural signals and converting them into text input for communication interfaces. Not emotions, not memories, but the hardware and software pipeline needed to translate neural activity into language tokens. What that patent establishes is that Meta wasn't improvising when the 2023 announcement landed. The engineering foundations had been built over years, methodically and quietly. Google filed its own version under patent number US111799141, filed in 2019, titled Brain-Computer Interfaces with Machine Learning. That system captures neural patterns through sensors and maps them to linguistic outputs using machine learning, a different company chasing the same target through similar technical architecture. Patent number US8515530, filed in 2011, connects to DARPA's Neural Engineering System Design Program through the University of California, where Meta and Google focused on words and language tokens. This one aimed at something harder to pin down: semantic representations and neural manifolds, meaning the conceptual meaning behind language rather than the words themselves. That distinction matters because semantic decoding sits at the edge of what researchers currently understand, and it's where the field's biggest open questions live. Rounding out the trail, patent number US 9367114, filed in 2014, covers non-invasive neural activity monitoring with high spatial accuracy, laying out how to collect large-scale brain data reliably. Taken together, these 4 documents describe a decade-long, multi-organization effort that was entirely public and almost entirely ignored. Meta's breakthrough wasn't an accident or a leap. It was the next step on a path that had been documented in plain sight. Strip away the drama, and the process breaks down into 4 steps. A scanner records changes in blood oxygen level dependent, bold signals across different regions of the brain. Those changes get mapped to patterns associated with specific meanings, concepts, objects, and actions through transformer architecture neural networks. A large language model then predicts the most probable sentence that pattern expresses. The output arrives as text. What separates Meta's system from earlier attempts isn't the architecture, which is recognizable to anyone who has followed the field. The gap is scale. Earlier systems could handle a handful of words at best, while Meta's handles thousands. And here's the thing that tends to get lost in coverage of these numbers. What this system produces is not mind reading in the way that phrase usually gets used. It's probability prediction at massive scale. The AI is making its best statistical guess about what a neural pattern most likely represents, and the fact that those guesses are now accurate enough to reconstruct sentences is what changed the equation. Researchers at Huth's lab have suggested that portable alternatives like FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy, could eventually move this technology beyond laboratory settings. The unknowns here carry as much weight as the confirmed findings, and this is the part that tends to get skipped. Every system that exists today requires cooperation from the subject, calibration specific to that individual, and physical hardware to capture the signal. None of the patents describe a method that bypasses those requirements. But technologies have a documented history of shrinking, accelerating, and escaping the controlled conditions they were born in, and the patent system doesn't put a ceiling on how far any of this can scale. That gap between what the documents show and what the trajectory suggests is where fair concern lives. Meanwhile, companies like Neuralink, Synchron, BlackRock Neurotech, Paradromics, and Precision Neuroscience are pursuing parallel approaches through invasive brain-computer interfaces, creating a competitive landscape where multiple technical pathways are being explored simultaneously. The BrainGate clinical trials have demonstrated how microelectrode arrays can enable paralyzed patients to control computer interfaces with remarkable precision. On emotions, none of the patents claim to decode them, and Meta's paper doesn't claim it either. Research in effective computing is advancing on a separate track, and what the brain does when it generates emotional states is understood far less clearly than what it does when processing language. Semantic ambiguity is where the field hits its hardest wall. Patent US 8515530 explicitly targets conceptual meaning rather than words, exploring latent semantic space. But the brain doesn't organize meaning in clean, labeled categories. Some researchers believe semantic decoding at scale is achievable. Others think there's a biological limit that will stop the field short, and nobody has resolved that disagreement yet. The scenario that deserves the most attention isn't perfect mind reading. It's flawed mind reading. If an AI misinterprets a neural pattern, the question of who holds responsibility, the subject, the model, the data pipeline, has no answer in any of the documents reviewed here. The patents don't resolve it. Regulatory frameworks like the FDA haven't addressed it, and neither does the research. Before anyone reaches for a panic response, here's what the current state of the technology actually allows. Nobody can access your private thoughts. Nobody can extract your memories. Nobody can decode inner speech without your active participation, individually calibrated sensors, and significant computational infrastructure working in a controlled environment. Every system operating today depends on structured tasks and conditions that look nothing like ordinary life. The real issue isn't what this technology does right now, it's that the evolution is happening inside patent filings and research papers that almost nobody reads, which means the public tends to encounter it only after the fact, without context, and without the decade of documented progress that explains how it got there. A decade ago, brain-to-text systems could decode 3 words. Today, they decode full sentences using transformer architecture and bold signal analysis. Where the field sits 10 years from now is a question nobody can answer with confidence, and that uncertainty is exactly why the patent system deserves attention. It's one of the only places where the future leaves a paper trail before it arrives. If you want more episodes that go directly to the source documents, the data, and the actual science behind the headlines, make sure you're subscribed.